Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So today we are doing one of my favorite suttas from Majjhima Nikaya, two kinds of thought. I remember when I was living in Perth, I kind of like I didn't have like many Buddhist people around me, so I immersed myself in suttas, right? So all my friends before were non-Buddhist before coming to here, Nalamara, and I was reading like many kinds of suttas, like I read Majjhima Nikaya and other kind of suttas. They were like very powerful, right? But one day I remember distinctly, I can still remember, how I was sitting, right? And reading this sutta. It just left a really big impact on me, right? I don't know why. So this main theme of this sutta is dividing the thoughts into two classes. So, okay, I will begin. So I'm using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation here from Sutta Central. And we read maybe a little bit from Bhante Sujato's translation later on for the parts which are missing here. Thus I've heard, on one occasion Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's grove, Nath Pindika's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus. Venerable Sir, they replied, the Blessed One said this: Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose, that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of cruelty, and I set on other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. Yeah. So as you can see, this was way before his enlightenment. Yeah? After he gave up, most likely, all those ascetic practices. Because remember, Buddha, he was doing all sorts of like meditations before, right? But then his main focus went on to body, right? He was kind of like torturing his body before. Then after he realized that's not the way, so he gave up. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my affliction, to others' affliction, and to affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. So there is a lot there in these few lines. So what he's saying is, he was putting his effort, right, into his mind now, right? His focus was onto his mind rather than his physical body. Yeah. And one of the other interesting thing he says is like, thought of sensual desire, arose in him. Sometimes we kind of like hear, Buddha, before that, he kind of like, already kind of like such a powerful being, he's been practicing, for so many lifetimes. Yeah. Yeah. He had metta, practicing metta, right, onto the path of bodhisattva, right? He came for the, welfare of all beings, right? Yeah. But no, in many ways he was like us. Yeah? He had, these thoughts. Yeah? Of course, sensual desire thought has like, many variations. Yeah? Over here, it doesn't necessarily mean kind of like strong lust. It could be kind of like, just a kind of like, desires which are kind of like, related to five senses, which are kind of much simpler. Yeah? It's hard to know. Yeah? So when he kind of like consider it, right, that it leads to my affliction, right? He's using wisdom power, or affliction of both, to other person. It obstructs wisdom. It means when we are kind of like have these thoughts, we can't see clearly. Our mind is kind of like gets blinded. Of course, when the mind is sort of like, can't see properly, you can't have good meditation. Yeah? And obviously it leads away from Nibbana. Yeah? Yeah? From coolness. Yeah? Away from extinguishment. Yeah? So when I consider this leads to my affliction, it subsided in me. Right? So what it means is he's seeing the danger. The danger is that you won't be able to have sort of like enlightenment, right? If you kind of like follow with that thought. When I consider this leads to others' affliction, it subsided me, right? It is kind of like having metta. That you don't want other people to kind of get hurt. That's why sometimes, this is what happens in the five sense world. People fight over, things of five senses. But mostly, these things, they kind of like, harms us in the long run. So if one has maybe wrong livelihood, right? It probably more kind of like dangerous for you. It probably may affects other people as well. Okay. So when I consider this leads to affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, leads away from Nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. Yeah. So this kind of line of abandoning it, removing it, right? It means he's already having kind of like, good samadhi. His mind is quite calm. Yeah? He's not into kind of like, deep states of jhana. Yeah? Yeah? But his mind is pretty calm. Yeah? And sometimes you can sort of see it when these thoughts kind of like arise. Yeah? You can catch them. Yeah? If your mind is not calm, it would be really hard to catch them. Yeah? People kind of like, just like many people in the world, they just kind of like, you keep on rolling with it, And people realize it much later on. Actually, do we take questions in between? Yeah? I'm not sure, I haven't been here for a long time.
Just want to.
I'm looking at the line, when I considered, it subsided in me. I'm wondering, what is the time period between considering that and it subsiding? Because it seems very, I don't know, just to consider it and it subsides straight away.
Yeah,
that seems difficult for me.
Of course, you first have to kind of like...
You have to be quite mindful first.
Yeah. If you see a kind of like a thief, you're inside the house, thief comes in, you recognize it, right? And he sees you, that you are inside, So then he kind of like, goes away.
Yeah, it seems like just to consider this is an affliction and it subsides.
Yeah.
For me, that must be straight away.
Yeah, because he's saying the danger in it, right? That is kind of like, leads to my affliction. Yeah. And also you need to have some sort of like, understanding before, right? Of sensual desires, what they do.
Have you ever experienced such an environment?
Well, you can see it in yourself, right? In daily life. It's only like later on you're refining it. Right? For example, if there is something hot, right? You're cooking, right? What do you do? Yeah, so you already need some sort of like, a lot of mindfulness already. Yeah. Buddha was considering like, he wasn't like a normal lay people. He was a renunciant living very hard life for kind of like 6 years already. Yeah. There's another question in the back. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Over there with the hands up. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just going to add to what we were just discussing. I've read somewhere that there's 3 ways of identifying.
3 ways, sorry, what?
Identifying, that you can identify before it happens, while it's happening, and after it happens. Is that the case? Like if you know you're going into a situation where you're going to have bad thoughts because in the past it has happened. You are aware you're going into this situation, it's happening.
Yeah.
Therefore, you protect yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the theory, not that I can do it.
Yeah.
Then while it's happening, it's so painful that you go, oh, I'm so angry, and you catch yourself.
Yeah.
But at other times, you go home, and then you go, oh, I was so bad when I was at that place. I got angry with that person. I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
So it's not just the thought, it's actually sometimes verbally or action-wise, you've already done something and you're feeling bad about it.
Yeah. Now, of course, you can, if you're sort of like mindful, you can see it coming up. Right? Is that always coming up, right? Then, then you can sort of like, do something about it. Yeah? But sometimes the force of those, thoughts is quite powerful. You sort of have to wear it, see it, right? It depends, on your personality, what kind of like, inclinations you carry. Yeah. So it's kind of like, you can say different for everyone. But over here, we're talking about somebody who has like very, very strong mindfulness here already.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of ill will arose in me, a thought of cruelty arose in me. I understood thus. This thought of cruelty has risen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to afflictions of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered thus, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of cruelty arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So these are kind of like very powerful words. Abandoning it, removing it. So this is kind of like, you can say, the power of wisdom. And there is also really nice sutta, I think, which comes after that, removing of the, obstructing thoughts. So how do you kind of do those ones is, you can see, first of all, you can see the danger. And another one is, you can pay attention to something else. And another way, you observe them and just wait for them to die out. Don't act on it, right? That requires a lot of patience. If somebody has like a lot of, strong personality, sometimes people can't do anything. That's why in the world we kind of like, what we do when existential crisis hits, right? To distract ourselves, we kind of like, indulge in more sensual things, right? So over here, we're doing it kind of like in a skillful way. And another one is changing your posture. You can change your posture. If you're sitting, you walk. You're walking, you sit. The clenching of teeth, that is kind of a use of like the willpower. That's the last resort. But I haven't heard anybody, right, who had to kind of like had do that or had success. Probably there are probably cases. And actually there is another little sutta where Buddha talks about, right, different kind of paths, right? Some monks have it easy, some monks don't, right? And he says that if you don't even have it easy, right, you have strong personality, you kind of, not getting really good meditation, right? You're suffering, the force of defilements is hard, right? You still bear it. It leads you kind of good results in the end, right? So a person like that, they probably have to do something like that. Yeah. Because it's different for all the monastics. Yeah. Yeah. That's why, it fits in well with rebirth. If we were just biological machines, we would all be same. Right? No, everybody is different. Yeah. Everybody has different kind of like a momentum of good and bad qualities. Yeah. Okay. Bhikkhus, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thought of sensual desire. Then his mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, upon thoughts of cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of non-cruelty to cultivate the thought of cruelty, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of cruelty. This kind of like a paragraph had such an impact on me, right? Because what he says is whatever you think, that sort of like becomes your inclination, right? And if you think about any thought on one subject, right? And thoughts related to that subject, would come in a different sort of like, variations. Yeah? And that what they would do, right? They would sort of like, condition you a lot. Yeah. No. This doesn't mean you kind of like meditating on Brahma Viharas. What it means, he's got. Pardon? Yeah, if you're meditating, so if you're doing a metta meditation or Brahma Viharas, yeah, of course, that would condition you. Right? Any thought, if you're thinking about thoughts of anger, let's say you're angry with somebody, right? You're gonna have many kind of like, variations of angry thoughts towards that person, right? But if you kind of like change your sort of like, perception, start to look at the good qualities towards the person you're angry with, right? Then you start to see the good qualities in him, right? And those thoughts would come in more sort of like a momentum and more variations, right? Just like Ajahn Brahm gives that, I think he made this story, right? Somebody you angry with, or you kind of like, or your partner or something is like, no, I think no, he talks about himself, like when people are depressed. He said, you have like a piece of paper, you write it down, right? What good thing did you do, right? And you start with the little things, right? Oh, it's like, oh, first he was like, oh, I didn't do anything, anything. It's like, oh yeah, I opened the door with somebody, right? Then he goes like, oh yeah, I said some kind things to him, my neighbor. Yeah, I was helpful to my colleague, right? So then you start to kind of like look at them, then your mind would come up with more things. It's almost like you turning the lights on, right? You're seeing more. Yeah.
Most of the time, the thought are neutral or fleeting, just come and go.
Uh-huh.
Neutral thought. Let's say I want to take a rest.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So what do you mean by that, neutral thought?
What I mean is that this is either good or bad.
Yeah.
So I'm taking it of neither good or bad.
Yeah.
Is that, where does it stand? How do you
Yeah. Because these are the thoughts which are more kind of like, powerful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So these would have impact on samadhi. Right? Thoughts which are kind of like, they are neutral. They're neither good or bad. Right? They're not causing any harm. Right? So these kind of like neutral thoughts would come into kind of like this category of basically non-ill will, right? Metta would be stick out more, right? So that is like a little bit of what do you call it, above par, right? So one are good, right? It says over here, I think, because I don't delve in Pali, right? So, what do you call it? Sorry. It's you can say, classification of thoughts which are non-harming. Yeah? Then you take it a step further after you start to meditate, want to go into jhanas, right? Then you have metta and stuff. Yeah. 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 So basically, your kind of like neutral thoughts would come into, I would say, into the non-cruelty or non-ill will. Yeah. But they don't have much power. Yeah. Okay. Just as in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn when the crop thickens, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he would be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into crops. So, too, I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. Yeah. So this is kind of like a simile, where kind of like, these cowherds, would have like, serious kind of like, punishment. And he was kind of like using the same simile for the mind states. That you would guard your mind. You don't let these unwholesome states doing much damage. And if you kind of think of these wholesome states, they have this benefit of renunciation, nikkhamma, and purification. Purification of the mind. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, the thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of renunciation has arisen in me. This doesn't lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, doesn't cause any difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a day, even for a night, and even for a day, even for a day and night, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body, and when the body is tired, the mind becomes strained. When the mind is strained, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought to singleness, concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be strained. So, sorry, can you speak in the mic?
That particular part there where the mind becomes strained because of thinking of pondering, it would seem to me that contemplation is supposed to be a good thing. No, that seems to me that it's saying that you can contemplate too much.
Yeah.
Is that what it's saying?
Yeah.
So you have to. So you've got to watch that.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. So he's using wisdom power, right? So we have to eat, right? We just don't keep on eating. The purpose of eating is not to kind of like have this taste, enjoying it all the time, right? The purpose of eating food is to keep our body healthy and have energy. That's it. So it's the similar with the thoughts. So
too much of a good thing. It's not good for you.
No, it depends on the context. Too much of Buddhism is very good. So what it means is you utilize it, right? Thoughts have a purpose. Yeah. Just like jhanas, deep meditations. That's the often criticism of jhanas, right? You say, oh, you're just gonna get attached. You're gonna get attached, right? That's what Buddha says. Like, oh, let other people say, yeah, of course you're addicted. He's like, oh, it's only gonna bring these results, the fruits of enlightenment. Of course, yeah. So over here, you can see you're using the focusing on thoughts of renunciation, of non-ill will, right? To get your mind to a state where the negative thoughts are not arising, right? So it becomes calm, right? Then what he says, he steadied his mind. It was calm, right? So he can take this his mind, to singleness, and then make it more quiet, to jhanas, stillness. That is the purpose of these thoughts. And actually that had a very deep impact on me. I was like, wow, just using these thoughts you can become enlightened. Right? And if you look at it from the perspective of Eightfold Path, that is Samma Sankappa. So you choosing, right intention. Your intention to calm your mind down. Yeah, I have one question. Yeah, sure, yeah. No limit.
What I find difficult is, on one side, there's non-self. So when a thought comes, it's not you. But then you got to intervene and do these daily things where there appears to be a self, or appears to be having some control over your forward motion of the next thought, or to renounce it. So is it so you need to have the right view. So, when you're a layperson, sometimes when a bad thought comes, you act on it, you feel like you defended yourself because something unfair has happened to you. You feel like you feel smart, or you don't see the danger in it because you feel like you are under attack and you had to say something to, it's not often that you catch yourself. Unless you really love someone and you hurt them, then you can see it straight away. Whereas at other times you feel like your ego or your person has to be protected, so you say some words. So what I'm saying is, how do you get that view of it being not good? Is it from experience, or is it conceptual?
Sorry, what not good?
The bad thoughts and then the action and the verbal stuff that comes from it. Is it experientially that you catch yourself all the time? Or I'm just trying to think about day-to-day things rather than in meditation.
Yeah.
How do you improve that? Is it from perception or feeling, or?
Well, if you are mindful, if you have enough energy, you can catch yourself, right? You can catch yourself even when you are speaking, right? Right in the middle of the action, right? And you can see that often, right? And people go their speech changes, their expression change, right? Sometimes it's hard for people to catch themselves. That is the problem. Right? Or afterwards they catch, then they realize, that came out wrong, right? Yeah. Or in different ways. Yeah. But I think what you were saying earlier was there is no one, right? But you have basically, normally Ajahn Brahm says, you have the power to say no. Yeah. Otherwise there would be no enlightenment. Yeah. So these are cause and effect. Obviously you have generated that power of saying no in the past. It's in the cause and effect, right? Yeah. This is the wonderful thing of conditioning. When people have are taking 5 precepts, they're practicing that, right? And you have something which is unwholesome, your mind obviously come up, no alcohol, I shouldn't have a bad speech. This is a really wonderful, this amazing thing, profound thing, how it conditions you. Yeah? It's all about conditioning.
But there's nothing about bad thought. I guess it's with no harm, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's all about conditioning. That's why too much Buddhism, I was saying earlier, is a good thing. You can basically conditioning yourself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the important point is that if you think... Oh, another question, sorry.
Yeah. What does it mean by steady my mind internally? Because from what I see in the sutta, is either one thing is also not good.
Can you speak in the mic?
Steady my mind internally.
Yeah.
Because the 5 hindrances is either, there are 5 of them is one thing and not one thing. So
Yeah.
steady my mind.
You want to use this one? It's still a bit quiet.
Okay.
You want to try that mic? That's still quite quiet.
Steady my mind internally.
Yeah.
What does it mean by that?
Steady my mind.
That means a lot of work onto it, is it? You got
Pardon, can you speak in the mic, please? Yeah, I can't hear properly sometimes.
steady my mind internally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better.
What does actually mean by that?
Uh-huh.
There is a, what should I say, input, wanting something to steady the mind.
Yeah.
But 5 hindrances say that you shouldn't be wanting or not wanting.
Yeah. Steady your mind internally, what it means is you are kind of like, calming it, right? So it's not unwavering, right? When thoughts are coming, right? Yeah. So otherwise basically distracting. Yeah. So you're bringing to stillness. Yeah.
Yeah, that means there's effort in
Sorry.
Yeah, there's an effort, yeah, of course. There's an effort, yeah, wisdom,
Sorry. Finish the.
So right effort here, yeah, that's okay, yeah. Right effort, you're using the right effort here. Yeah. So that's what it means usually, right? When we say in Buddhism, effort. Right? Sometimes people misunderstand. Oh, I should sit so many hours, right? People ask monks this question normally: how many hours you sit in one sit, right? How many hours in a day, right? Yeah. People kind of don't really understand, right? That it's not about just kind of like one sit. It's kind of like throughout the day. What kind of effort are you putting when these thoughts come, right? What you pay attention to. Right? Somebody asked Ajahn Chah, right? How many hours you sit and stuff? He goes like, chickens sit on eggs all day. They don't become enlightened.
What does he mean by that? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, I think he's trying to be kind of like a funny here. Of course, chickens are not meditating, right? Basically, you watching your mind, you're using mindfulness. I remember reading in his autobiography, or in his biography, sorry, not autobiography. When he was a young monk, he went to see this monk who lived on a hill, and he thought like this monk was really good. Then he would see this old monk doing all sorts of things during the day, like sweeping, if there were patching needs to be done, right? Lot of simple physical work, right? And he said like, oh, he's not doing much walking meditation, he's not doing much sitting meditation, right? Then this monk, he said to Ajahn Chah, he said, you can practice mindfulness in different postures, in different variations. It's about the stillness, what's happening in your mind.
Did the Buddha prescribe walking as a posture for meditation?
Yes.
So the movement is still considered a posture, despite being
Yeah.
a posture typically thought of as a stationary position of the body.
Yeah.
So why is that?
I don't know.
Does anyone know?
It's not a posture. I mean, this could be has to.
Me as a native English speaker, I wouldn't call walking a posture.
Yeah, or position. You can say position. Yeah.
Position, action, perhaps.
Yeah.
State.
Yeah. Whatever makes you happy, you can label. Come up
Well,
with your.
I've got a copy of the English dictionary, and I read posture,
Yeah.
and walking doesn't come under posture.
Yeah.
So I'd say, that's a bit of an inaccuracy in the English translations of the suttas. Calling walking a posture is perhaps an inaccurate description of terminology, and perhaps a fault of the Buddha even, if he's calling walking a posture, which I doubt many native English speakers would agree with.
Yeah, I don't think Buddha was wrong.
You think the Buddha was wrong?
I don't think he called it a posture.
What did he call it?
Because he didn't speak English.
So do you know what the word that he used was to describe these bodily states, for lack of a better description?
No, I don't know what Pali. Maybe I'll let you know later on after the class.
Okay.
I'll look it up, Pali.
That would be good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, can you speak in the mic?
And Ajahn Jagro, who used to be in charge here,
Yeah.
you know him, he said that when he went to Thailand, he was with Ajahn Chah,
Yeah.
and Ajahn Chah told them they had to meditate. And Ajahn Jagro said, how can we meditate? We're working all day. We're doing this and that all day. And Ajahn Chah picked up his cup of tea, and when he said, this is what I mean by meditate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But there have been many monks being enlightened by walking meditation.
Yeah. He says is the benefits of walking meditation is if you have sort of like attained samadhi, right? It's much stronger, it's long lasting, and you also become sort of like, healthy as well, right? So.
In yoga, they have postures known as asanas. Would these be considered postures in the Buddha sense as well?
Like yoga postures?
Yeah, like Padmavasana or Shavasana, things like that.
Yeah, they're different postures. Yeah.
And so would these also be different vehicles to enlightenment?
Yeah, but actually, why yoga was invented, especially the physical part, was to strengthen the body, right? Because those sadhus and yogis, right, they didn't have gym back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Right? And actually, stretching is really helpful to your body.
And strengthening, I think.
Huh?
I think strengthening and stretching,
Yeah, exactly.
both together is very
exactly,
good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Otherwise, you just get sore and miserable during your meditations.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know many people who try to push it. I'm going to sit for more hours. Yeah. And then they cause damage to their knees. Yeah. It happens. We had happened recently in the monastery, right? Some young person, he was trying he's going to push it, right? He having some good meditation, right? He think, he probably can push it. I can sit longer. Maybe I can get it, right? Yeah. So then he was caused damage to his knee.
Do you know what the damage was exactly?
I don't remember it, but he's been seeing a physio for a long time.
Okay.
After that, yeah. So you have to be careful. Okay, you go ahead.
with the walking meditation, one of the mindfulness is looking at the 4 elements. Recently, I went to a Sri Lankan meditation retreat where they talk about the 4 elements. So when you're saying mindfulness in walking meditation, do you just look at movement, or can you also look at like the mindfulness of the 4 elements?
No, when you're doing walking meditation, you're aware of where you're walking.
Yeah.
Right, of your posture, right? So you pay attention to the sole of your feet and maybe 1.5 meters or 2 meters ahead. So when you take one step, your attention should be on the sole of your foot. That's the only time Buddhists believe in soul. Right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, you can, but the simplest way is onto the movement. Yeah. Of course, you're kind of like focusing on your mind as well, right? Thoughts will come, then you bring it back. Thoughts will come, and you bring it back. Yeah.
But as you advance, then he would look at elements. Like, your earth and the leg from one position to the other.
Yeah.
Goes and you feel the wind element.
Yeah. But for kind of like a beginners, it confuses them. What should I be focusing on? Yeah. So these are kind of like a natural stuff which happens. Many people have different kind of like experiences. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Otherwise, we won't finish. Okay. So, as I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of non-ill will arose in me, a thought of non-cruelty arose in me. I understood thus, the thought of non-cruelty has risen in me. This doesn't lead to my own affliction or to affliction of others, to affliction of both. It aids wisdom. It doesn't cause difficulties, leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day and night, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body. And when the body is tired, mind becomes strained. And when the mind is strained, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought to singleness, concentrated. Why is that? So that my mind should not be strained. Bhikkhus, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, he has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation. Then his mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, upon thoughts of non-cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of cruelty to cultivate the thought of non-cruelty. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of non-cruelty. Yeah. So this is basically you building momentum here. Yeah. I think I kind of like, you went ahead, sort of like covered it. Yeah. Yeah. So your thoughts of renunciations would increase, right? When you see the benefit, right? When you kind of like ponders upon these thoughts, right? Of non-ill will, non-cruelty, the more will come, different ways, right? Which leads to wisdom. Okay. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops have been brought inside the village, a cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the roof of a tree or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that cows are there, so that there was need for me only to be mindful that those states were there. So over here now, he has to put less effort. So in the beginning, you kind of like putting much more effort, when all those unwholesome states of mind were coming, right? Just like he was like tapping the cows, and guiding them. But over here, he could be at sort of like sitting at a distance and watching. Oops. Hang on. Tireless energy was aroused in me. Unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled. My mind concentrated and unified. Right. So now those thoughts, they have done their job, right? He had established a lot of mindfulness, and he was experiencing piti sukha in his kind of like mind and body, and his kind of like mind became still and unified, and that's where we see, Now we switch to Bhante Sujato's translation, because it's missing here. Sorry. How would I go to the other tab here? I'm trying to press escape. It's not working. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay. Quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, I entered and remained in the first absorption, which has rapture, bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. So this is a first jhana. The translation, if you not used to Bhante Sujato, he's using a little bit of different words here compared to Bodhi. As the placing of the mind, keeping it connected, were stilled, I entered and remained in the second absorption, which has rapture and bliss born of immersion, with internal clarity and mind at one, without placing the mind, keeping it connected. And with the fading away of rapture, I entered and remained in the third absorption, where I meditated with equanimity, mindful and aware, personally experiencing the bliss of which the noble ones declare, equanimous, mindful, one meditates in bliss. With the giving up of pleasure and pain, and the ending of former happiness and sadness, I entered and remained in the fourth absorption. Without pleasure or pain, the pure equanimity and mindfulness. When my mind has my mind had emerged in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, imperturbable. I extended it towards the recollection of past lives. I recollected many kinds of past lives with features and details. This was the first knowledge which I achieved in the first watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed. Knowledge arose. Darkness was destroyed. Light arose, as happens for a meditator who is diligent, keen, and resolute. Any questions here? No? Okay. When my mind had become immersed in samadhi like this, I extended it towards knowledge of the death and the rebirth of sentient beings with clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman. I saw sentient beings passing away, being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, in a good place or a bad place. I understood how sentient beings are reborn according to their deeds. This was the second knowledge which I achieved in the middle watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose, darkness was destroyed, light arose. As happens for a meditator who is diligent, keen, and resolute. So over here, diligent, keen, and resolute, it has been used before, right? Basically, this right, using the right effort. That's what it kind of like refers to. When my mind had become immersed in samadhi like this, I extended it towards knowledge of the ending of defilements. I truly understood this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the practice that leads to cessation of suffering. I truly understood these are defilements. This is the origin of defilements. This is the cessation of defilements. This is the practice that leads to cessation of defilements. Knowing and seeing like this, my mind was freed from defilements of sensuality. Desire to be reborn and ignorance. I understood rebirth is ended. Spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is nothing further for this place. This was the third knowledge which I achieved in the last watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose, darkness was destroyed, light arose, as happens for a meditator who is diligent, keen, and resolute. So we kind of switch to Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. So this is, I think, what we finished here is the kind of like the basically enlightenment, right? Choosing the three knowledges. So it also kind of shows here that rebirth is a central part of the teachings. People with the really good samadhi can sort of recollect their past lives. Right? There are many past lives. Then you see the danger in them. Right? Just like you see the danger in unwholesome thoughts. Right? You see the dangers of in many rebirths. That there is more suffering. And you see the kind of like the fruits of many sort of like good and bad karmas. And what kind of rebirth it leads to. When you have like a bigger view, like the right view, then you can utilize, and sort of like, then you have nibbida. Your mind automatically turns if you have a bigger view. So kind of like especially for people who are new to Buddhism, they kind of a little bit skeptical about rebirth, they should sort of like check it out more, explore. Because rebirth and suttas talking about rebirth, the whole doctrine, has given so much emphasis again and again in the suttas. Okay. Suppose bhikkhus that in a wooded range there was a great low-lying marsh near which a large herd of deer lived. Then a man appeared, desiring their ruin, harm, bondage, and he closed off the safe and good path to be travelled joyfully, and he opened up a false path. Then he put out a decoy and set up a dummy, so that large herd of deer might later come upon calamity and disaster and loss. But another man came, desiring their good, welfare and protection, and he reopened the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he closed off the false path. And he removed the decoy, destroyed the dummy, so that large herd of deer might later come to growth, increase, and fulfillment. Bhikkhus, I have given this simile in order to convey a meaning. This is the meaning. The great low-lying marsh is a term for sensual pleasures. Large herd of deer is a term for beings. The man desiring their ruin, harm, and bondage is a term for Mara, the evil one. The false path is a term for the wrong eightfold path, that is wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, wrong concentration. The decoy is a term for delight and lust. The dummy is a term for ignorance. The man desiring their good, welfare and a protection is a term for Tathagata, accomplished and fully enlightened. The safe and good path to be travelled joyfully is a term for Noble Eightfold Path. That is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, or right stillness, as Ajahn Brahm likes to call it. So, bhikkhus, the safe and the good path to be travelled joyfully has been reopened by me. The wrong path has been closed off, the decoy removed, dummy destroyed. What should be done for the disciples out of compassion by a teacher who seeks their welfare and compassions for them, that I have done for you, bhikkhus? There are these roots of trees, these empty huts. Meditate, bhikkhus. Do not delay, or else you will regret it later. This is our instructions to you. This is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in Blessed One's words. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Hey, it's done. Does anybody have any questions? All happy? Are there any questions? Oh, okay. Yeah.
I do. Sorry, I do have one question.
Yeah.
Somewhat unrelated to the talk. However, something that's always confused me about Buddhism, especially Theravada Buddhism, because that is seen as the scientific Buddhism out of Mahayana, Vajrayana, Theravada. You know, people tend to have this assumption that Theravada is logical from a Western perspective. However, there are still many suttas in the Pali canon which describe siddhis. You know, things like fireballs and walking on water. Maybe that's a Christian thing, but fireballs is one that I distinctly remember reading, and I've got the sutta at home printed out.
What do you mean by fireballs?
There's some people who could shoot fireballs from their hands, and it's a sutta. And I was like, why is this a sutta? This doesn't sound like something that's possible to me, but it's in the Pali canon, and the Pali canon is the word of the Buddha. So what is the explanation for these things in a modern sense? It can't just be an analogy or a hypothetical. The way it's described is very, very much that it's a real thing that is possible.
I think they may be very futuristic. They could be referring to anime.
Anime.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
But there's other things like, you know, having two people in different areas at the same time.
Yeah.
Like superposition, walking through walls, reading minds, all sorts of siddhis which are described in the suttas. And these are things, you know, which conventional society doesn't consider to be true. What are your, genuine thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, conventional society consider many things not to be true, right? So we can't take everybody's perspective. What we should do is look for evidence, right? And of course, there are things which are added in Pali canon, right? Which are later on additions. And you should check it out, Bhante Sujato's and Ajahn Brahmali's early Buddhism course, which they did here, I think in 2013 or 14, if my memory serves me right. I think 13. Yeah, 2013. It's on YouTube. And then they published, I think, a book by Oxford Library. It's called, I think, Early Buddhism Studies, right? Now the question of psychic powers, do they really exist? Yes. Reading minds? Yes. Right?
So what am I thinking right now?
Huh?
What am I thinking right now?
I'm not claiming I'm going to read your mind, but these things. I tell you an example. There was like an Aussie guy like you, right? He was kind of like very much interested in Buddhism, right? Meditates, very spiritual. He was also in Advaita Vedanta, He came and had a few conversations with me, and he was going traveling, right? Then I said, go to Thailand. And I sent him to this particular monk. I said, yeah, go visit him. And then he read his mind, and he told him sort of like things which he could have never sort of like known, right? It wasn't on internet, wasn't on like, available anywhere. And he was absolutely kind of like amazed that how this monk could know this stuff, right? It wasn't just a coincidence. And one of the famous ones, which is like many decades old, was of, I think it's recorded quite well, of what was his name? Ramdas. I talked on Friday night talk about rebirth and psychic powers, actually. You should listen to that talk. And what he was a professor of psychology.
Yeah, at Harvard, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Richard Alpert was his original name?
Yeah. So, and this another American who was living in India at that time, he took him to see this Neem Karoli Baba, right? And this sadhu had like these psychic powers, right? So
I think he gave him a super dose of LSD as well to test this guru.
Yeah.
So I've read his book, and he gives a mega dose of LSD that no one would take ever.
Yeah.
And then the guru in India, not knowing that he's being given this dose of drugs, he just looks at Ram Dass and he just gives him like a cheeky sort of wink.
Yeah.
And then he just goes about on his day. And Ram Dass was like, wow, this guy's, the real deal. If he can take that much LSD and not be bothered by it, then this guy's for real.
Yeah, I think what they did was because all these Westerners used to take LSD, right? I think what they said, like one day he said like, oh, you have that yogi medicine, right? So they gave him like this one little dose, right? So he kind of like, did it. And then nothing happened, he was sitting there. Then he went back to America, he was like, oh, maybe he tricked me or something, right? He could have just flicked it when he kind of like, that's typical Indian way, when they put the medicine, they kind of go like this, rather than Westerners, you put in your mouth like this, right? So he's like, oh, okay, maybe he kind of like flicked it in the back, nothing happened.
That's not what he says in the book, though.
No, just a sec.
Sorry.
Yeah. So then he came back. Next time he went to India, right? Because he had all these doubts, right? And he says to Ram Dass, he's like, oh, you still have that yogi medicine, I would like to try. So he put some LSD on him. And he's like, no, more. He put some more. He's like, no, more. And apparently there was so much LSD on his hand, he was like, that would take down so many people, right? And he's an old man, right? And it probably had so much bad effect on him, he probably can die or something. So then what he did, he took one LSD one by one, right, with water, swallowing it and showing it that he was taking, right? Because one of the things which comes out from it is that he read his mind, he was skeptical about him, right? And then he just sat there, right? He was waiting there that anything would happen, right? And he was watching him. He's like, how come it has having no effect on him, right? Then he used to have this kind of a cloth, like a what do you call that? Sheet on him, right? Or blanket, right? And because he didn't wear any shirt. So what he did was he put it on his, he covered himself, right? Right? Then after they were waiting there, after 10 minutes he comes out, he was like acting all crazy, right? He was poking fun of him, right? Well, taking these medications, all these psychoactive drugs, it's not a good thing. I think what Ram Dass was saying, he was trying to show that these drugs are not that powerful compared to the power of meditation. He probably wasn't using skillful ways to convey the meaning.
Definitely, I agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Leads me to one other question, which is leaving my mind, but I'm going to try and get it back. So in Vajrayana Buddhism and also in tantric practices in Hinduism, the use of drugs and intoxicants is a tantric method to attain enlightened states. This is called Tantra, secret doctrines. This is something that has also confused me because it conflicts, at least with the 5 precepts.
Yeah.
However, because at least Vajrayana is still considered Buddhism, the use of these substances to rapidly attain enlightenment seems to me plausible. However, I'd like to get a Theravadan monk's opinion on this.
Okay. First, you need to understand that Vajrayana Buddhism came out of India, right, much later on. So they already had so much mixing with the local kind of like other sects like Hinduism and stuff. Many of their gods, right, which they say in Tibetan Buddhism are Hindu. And you find exact parallels of those gods in Hinduism nowadays. Yeah? And many of those, like Om, is never used in Pali Canon. Right? But it's used in kind of like, Hindu traditions. Om Mani Padme Hum is nothing. Like all these rituals and chanting, like prostrations. Yeah? So these are very Hindu ideas. And when they say secret, right, it always means something dodgy. When you say something secret, no. What does Buddha says in the suttas? He's like, go monks, go out in different directions, tell people. Be open about it. So even like with monks' rules, monastic rules, when you start hiding from lay people these rules, right, it leads to decline of Buddhism. Behavior, virtuous behavior and everything, right, they go together. If it was like, there was some other sort of like a shortcut, Buddha would have given. Marijuana and all sorts of drugs were already available in India, right? It grew natively all throughout India and parts of Asia and China, right? There was a kind of like an example of this monk, right? He had these psychic powers. He defeated this Naga, right, in a battle, and the lay people found out. It's like, oh, he's a very powerful monk. And next day he went to alms round. They asked him, like, what do you want? He's like, oh, give us what you hard to get. Right? He's like, what do you want? It's like alcohol. So he got some alcohol, right? And then what that monk was, he was like, lying drunk, right, in the path, somewhere down the road. And the Buddha says, few days ago, that bhikkhu, right, that monk defeated a naga. Now he can't even defeat a little lizard. Right? So, substances, people go crazy. I worked in mental health before. Yeah? You don't know what kind of sort of like, conditions or predispositions of your mind is like. Yeah? We're already putting so many chemicals and stuff with our, with our food and stuff, right? And on top of that, putting drugs into your system is not a good idea. Yeah?
Okay.
Go high on drug of love, metta.
What about the other Brahma Viharas? Sorry, because obviously that's
one is enough.
Metta is enough.
Metta is more than good enough.
I like equanimity. I think equanimity is a fun one to
whatever
practice.
Suits you, whatever makes you happy.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. Very good. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, actually, are there any questions from overseas? 2 questions? Okay. Oops, sorry, forgot about them. Is yoga part of Buddhism? No. Dear Venerable Buddha, if everything is conditioned, how can we change our attitude and make it stick? Can we go against the conditioning? So what do you do, especially over here, right? This sutta is all about reconditioning your mind, right? So you focus. If you focus on kind of unwholesome qualities, they would increase, right? That's how you condition. Right? Everything we do, it leaves these kind of like, impact, these imprints on our mind. Yeah? This is what conditioning is. Yeah? That's the kind of like, simplest answer. Yeah? And obviously there is some conditioning from the past for you to kind of gravitate towards Dhamma. So if you just pay attention to it, it would increase. Yeah. That's the simplest way to look at it. Yeah. Hopefully it's helpful. All right, okay, now we can just pay respect to Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Arahant Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavatam Abhivademi Svakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamma Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangha Namami